I'm Parker the Comic Recluse. Welcome back to my show, Flashbacks. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Today, we're going to be going over Spider-Man Life Story, written by Chip Zdarsky, drawn by Mark Bagley. In this episode of Flashbacks, we're going to go over what I liked about the book, what I disliked about the book, and why I think you should pick it up. And if you do pick it up, I hope you decide to support your local comic book store. Let's get into it. So, the first thing that's very unique about this book is that it's a one and done. You can pick up this book, you get a whole story. It's a what if, so it's outside of continuity. You don't need to know anything about Spider-Man to enjoy it. That being said, there are going to be spoilers in this review, but I will not be giving a one-to-one, and it will not be a breakdown like my first episode. We're going to do a very short breakdown. So, let's get into the first part of the book, and the chapter opens up in the 1960s. Boom. You get Spider-Man's origin, and it's done beautifully here by Bagley. Like, I cannot say enough about the art in this book. If you only pick it up for Bagley's art, you would have paid, it would have been money well spent. And that's all I say on that. So you get the origin of Spider-Man, the bite from the radioactive spider. You get Uncle Ben. You get great power responsibility with Spider-Man's constant struggle throughout the book of whether or not he should or should have gone to Vietnam during the war, because yes, that's all going on at the time in the 1960s. So you get some conflict between him and Norman Osborn, which is great and always amazing to see. If you know anything about Spider-Man, you already know who Norman Osborn is. You get the relationship of him and Gwen. You get even a good cameo by J. Jonah Jameson, and he is at his, well, most Jameson here, for sure. You get conflict with him, between him and Flash, because you always have to see him deal with his high school bullies, even when he's in college. But him and Flash actually reconcile here, and it's a nice story and a great feel-good moment. If you like the character of Flash, he's portrayed well here, and you get some interesting tidbits that make you think. You get conflict with the Green Goblin, who absolutely looks amazing. Again, I have to bring up Bagley's art, and not to knock the writing at all, Green Goblin is written absolutely brilliant throughout the book. Trust me on that. You get some great moments between Pete and Gabi right at the beginning. Some great action. Gabi blowing things up, making things complicated. Peter putting the smack down on him. Gabi getting amnesia, just like a soap opera in the 80s. It's amazing. You get the wisdom of Captain America, Spider-Man coming to him for advice, and Cap just breaking it down beautifully for him. Reaffirms that great power, great responsibility, and it makes Spidey do something in that I wish he had done in the real continuity, and it's turn Norman Osborn in. Yeah. Norman Osborn gets turned in for being the Green Goblin here, and he can't amnesia his way out of it, so to speak. Out of that, we get the reveal of Gwen finding out about Spidey, well, Peter being Spidey, and that's actually the end of the chapter there. That's the end of the 1960s. We move into the 70s, and unfortunately, Flash didn't make it. He managed to do a few years of his tour, and Peter is actually at his grave meditating there. He seems to come there often and speak with Flash and just try and, make amends for how he felt like a heel for not going, but also realizing that his responsibility was to the home front, so to speak. And Flash kind of absolves him for it while they're in the bar at the end of that chapter in the 60s, right before he goes to fight Green Goblin. He tells him that he's going because it's what Spider-Man would do. That at first makes Peter kind of feel guilty, but Flash is just like, well, he's here saving our bacon every day. It's really great to see them reconcile. It's really great to see that energy, and it's really great that after the fact that Peter still acts on it. I love the consistency that Peter shows throughout this book for the most part. It may take him a while, but he always manages to pull his head out of his ass. Moving on, as we move through the 70s, we get Peter working with Reed Richards. We see how they clash back and forth on good, evil, and, stagnation. They go back and forth between how Peter is like, you invent things that could change lives, like unstable molecules. They eventually get into a fight. Peter goes too far. He mentions how his wife left them, and let's just say Peter is abruptly fired. My goal here is for you to pick up the book, so don't expect a one-to-one, and don't expect a breakdown like the first episode. We're flashing through this. This is a flashback. So moving on from the 70s. So moving on, we find out that Gwen has been working for Miles Warren. And if you are familiar with the original continuity in any form, you know who Miles Warren is and you know what he did. He made clones, because that's what Miles Warren does. Freaking jackal. So we get a conflict between Spidey and a new goblin, the Black Goblin. Who's that? Who do you think? It's one of the Osborns. I'll give you a guess. It's one of the ones who's not in jail. His name starts with an H. They fight. Spidey convinces Gabi that it don't gotta be like this. Harry, of course, relents. Tosses some bombs to destroy the clones. And that's when we find out the unfortunate fact that one of the clones is not a clone. I'll give you 3 guesses as to which one that is. Anywho, the Spider-Man clone survives, and there's some conflict there. I believe Peter refers to him as Franken-Peter. We move on to end out the 70s with some horrid realizations, and let's just say Gwen moves on after the fact. That's something I want you to discover for yourself when you pick up the book. So, another reason to pick up the book. We close out the 70s strong with this great story with Helen and Ben, hint hint, leaving and starting their new lives together. MJ goes to confront Peter, who's basically catatonic from this whole experience of clones, which is me picking up a comment. Who wouldn't go catatonic from all this clone conspiracy? So I don't really blame Peter for this one, but I do believe he could have had at least a little bit of a better reaction. Be fair, I'm not the one in this situation, and it's that Parker, not this Parker. So, moving on, him and MJ hook up after this, and we move on into the 80s. Unfortunately, if you know Spider-Man's continuity, you know in the 80s he was kind of busy with Secret Wars. Well, while he's busy with Secret Wars in this book, MJ's back home on Earth having twins. So yeah, she's not exactly happy about that, and she doesn't know where he is. She's afraid for her husband. Pete, of course, participates in the Secret Wars. He and Reed make up. They have a very touching conversation, and then Peter goes and gets his black suit. We skip the rest of the Secret Wars to come on home, bring it back to New York, and Spider-Man is swinging through the city on his way home. He gets home and his wife freaks out because she doesn't know who that is in the black suit. He demasks, they reconcile, she introduces him to his children, and she catches him up on everything that happened while he was gone. Apparently, the world went crazy. Russia sent nukes. Vision tried to stop one of them, and he couldn't. It ended up landing in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and wiped the city away. Now Vision stands as a monument, intangible to the destruction and death. Maybe because he malfunctioned from the nuclear blast, but I like to think that it was the trauma of watching everyone around him be vaporized. The expression alone is enough to pick this up. The expression on Vision's face alone is enough to pick up this book. So you may hear me say it several more times before the end of this show, but if you pick up the book for nothing more than Vision's reaction, then you would have spent good money. So we move on through the 80s. Reed and Peter have words about his costume, because that's who's been helping him with these radio sponges, as he calls them, to clean up this, nuclear mess. Peter is then called back home to deal with a family situation. Apparently, May has wandered off with the children, and MJ wants to put her in a home, which is fair because Peter's never around to help take care of her and the kids and anything else, because he's busy being Spider-Man, practicing his great power and great responsibility. Peter, of course, misses the point of the whole argument. I mean, he's smart enough to know what's going on, but you know how Peter is. They have words, and he decides he's going to go and get some air. He leaves the suit, since that is a point of contention. He leaves Venom basically at home in its containment jar and puts on the old suit to go and get some air. When he's confronted by someone else in the black suit. You know who this is if you've ever read any Spider-Man book. It's Kraven. So you get Kraven in this book. Black suit and everything. He shoots Spider-Man, he buries him, and instead of what happens in the original continuity, we get the Venom symbiote busting out of its containment jar and coming and rescuing Peter, bonding with him and hulking him out into this venomized Spider-Man. Let's just call him Venom at this point, I suppose. So he rips out of the grave and finds Kraven, and he's about to, straight up end him. That's about the time Mary Jane shows up with Peter's contingency for if this happened, because he knew the suit was alive. And she uses it against him, but for her, that's the final straw. She can't do no more when it comes to Peter. She leaves him. Kraven is about to off himself, and he's stopped by something. I'll leave you to figure out what. From there, we jump into the 90s, and it is the return of Doc Ock in all his glory. For some reason, though, he's in Chicago. What's in Chicago that Doc Ock might want? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's Ben Reilly. So he kidnaps Ben Reilly, who's been gone this entire time from the original clone conspiracy in the 60s to now. He's been gone since his original cloning in the 70s. It's the 90s now, and now he makes a reappearance with Doc Ock kidnapping him to steal the secrets of his DNA and cloning. We see Stark after Peter's company, Parker Industries, which does adhesives and cell phones. Go figure. And we see Peter putting on the costume as an older man. He calls it dutiful, joyless, like an old man's trip to the gym every day. Just had to give you that bit of dialogue right there, because excuse me. That's just an example of some top-notch writing from Zdarsky right there. Bagley again is crushing the art. Doc Ock looks really cool with all the arms. They're expansive but not ridiculous. And you get to see a lot of them. It's very fun. So we get Doc Ock back in New York, not Chicago now, and he's after the real Spider-Man. He's tossing cars and buses to distract him. Very cool shots. Spidey catches him, but is distracted and gets knocked out. Typical Parker move. And, well, he wants to figure out how to clone them. So he takes them to Osborn's lab. Why Osborn, you ask? Well, he's grabbed Harry Osborn too and made him bring him to the lab and give him access. So we get a whole sequence between Ock, Riley, and Parker. And unfortunately, poor Harry ends up taking the brunt of it. And Ock takes his life. Peter is distraught. Ben is angry. And so passes Harry Osborn. He and Peter reconcile in the end, but I leave the beautiful words of Zdarsky in that emotional moment for you to discover. After that, Peter gives his life up to Ben because Pete's tired, and in the process, well, Og told them that Ben was the real one and Peter was the clone. More on that in a moment. They exchange pleasantries, and yeah, Peter just hands over his life. A notebook. He spent about a week writing in a notebook everything that he needed to know, and he hands it off to Ben and calls it a day, man. He says, here's the keys to the kingdom, literally. The vault of costumes, the accounts for money, all of it's yours, bro. Do it with it what you will. Then you get the fact that he and, yeah, get this, Pete and Jessica Jones hooked up. And they were a thing for a while. He hired her to follow somebody, keep tabs on him. Him who, you ask? Well, none other than Norman Osborn, who had gotten out of jail a while ago and had been playing the card of the senile old man. You know, how much do you believe a goblin can go senile? They don't. There's an exchange. Gobby gets all clever boy and all of that on him. That's a really good line. I always hear that in Willem Dafoe's voice. That will always be Green Goblin to me. Disagree with me down in the comments. I dare you. Moving on, we get this great scene with him and Gobby, and you think it's going to be an amazing beginning to another conflict, and no, Gobby's an old man. He has a freaking heart attack, and he dies hating Peter Parker to the core of his soul. I did warn you about spoilers in this book, right? This is just a great moment, and no matter how I describe it to you, you don't want to miss it. It's so good. I love this part. I love this part of the book because it just captures Gobby's obsession perfectly. Hates you. Just last words. That's it. And Peter's just like, you could have been so much more, but you were obsessed with fighting me. Pathetic. And then he immediately leaves New York, flies out to Pennsylvania, and rejoins his family, where he lives with them in peace for several years. Then we get the 2000s, and we get Ben Reilly as Spider-Man fighting against Morlun. If you know anything about the original continuity, no Morlun's bad news. He's got like +5 or +10 to Spider-Man or whatever. I really don't know. He's like cosmically charged against them. Apparently their powers don't work fully on him or something, and he beats the brakes off of Ben Reilly, calls him a copy, and drains him dry, and thus passes Ben Reilly, unfortunately. an inglorious death, in this book at least. So we move on. There's fallout for Spider-Man dying. He's of course unmasked. Once everybody knows he's a clone, we get him pulled in. We get Peter, who's conflicted about being pulled back into this whole civil war and conflict, and there's a back and forth between his daughter, which she encourages him to do the right thing, which is amazing. I love the way that she's written. She's a very strong character. I wouldn't mind seeing more of her. Moving on, she says all the right things. She convinces him to be a hero, to mask up again, and I'm actually going to quote this directly. You have to fight for a better tomorrow. You have to be a hero. I agree. And if you agree as well, agree down in the comments with her. Claire is awesome, and I'd love to see some more of her. She gave Spidey the kick in the pants he needed to put back on the suit and do the right thing. So he goes to New York. He drops the clone conspiracy at the Daily Bugle, and Betty, who's running the place now, tells him, hey, look, great story, love it, but only a matter of time before somebody, I believe the whole thing about the clone, but it's only a matter of time before somebody puts two and two together and figures out that you were Spider-Man before that. He's like, yeah, I know. So he heads to Parker Industries, and guess who's there waiting for him? Tony Stark, Secretary of State. Yeah, or Iron Man Secretary of State. This whole time throughout the book, there's been this underlying conflict with Tony Stark, Iron Man, and Captain America. They are having a civil war throughout the book, and now the civil war has moved into the Superhuman Registration Act. So it's the Iron Flunkies, as I call them, like that, the Iron Flunkies. If you got a better name for them, put it down in the comments. We'll see what you got. But I like Iron Flunkies. Or Iron Lackeys, since Doom comes up in this book. Doom is always relevant, though. So it's the Iron Flunkies versus Captain America's Avengers. We get Morlun showing up at the Parker house. There's an epic fight. I will not spoil. There's not much to spoil there. It's a pretty short fight, and the kids come out on top eventually, but there are sacrifices made. And if you want to know how it goes, you're going to have to read the book. Again, I have to mention Bagley's art. Morlun has probably never looked cooler. I'm not even going to lie. Like, I joke around, I call him a badly dressed cosplayer, this, that, and the other, but there's this shot of him, and dude looks cool. He makes this outfit look cool. Bagley just nailed it. Anywho, we jump back to the fight. The Iron Lackeys versus Spidey, and Spidey is taking the brunt of it, especially not suited up. The Avengers arrive to assist, and an epic fight ensues. Spider-Man reveals that he's been waiting for this moment to deal with Tony for a while, and he gets the upper hand after he suits up, activates a device on his suit, and deactivates all of the Iron Lackey's armor. Why? Because Tony Stark's a jerk, and you know he'd have contingencies against his own people. And so did Spidey. So Spidey joins the Avengers. Then we get to 2010s, and this is around the time where we're going to be wrapping up the story. We get this great shot of Pete and MJ having a moment. Miles is now in the book. He got bitten by a radioactive spider as well. He got his powers, and was Spider-Man for a time when Spider-Man was thought to be dead or missing. Apparently, in the interim between the 2000s and the 2010s, well, Doom happened and he took over everything. So now Doom is the big bad and the villain. There's no Civil War, there's no Vietnam War, there's no conflict between Iron Man and Captain America because most everybody's dead. According to Peter, it's not just all his enemies that are dead. It's Cap, Tony, Reed, Jessica. Everyone's missing or dead. Doom tore through us. Exact quote. And that's enough for me. Zdarsky definitely infuses some weight there with those words. Doom tore through us. Period. That's it. I don't need any more explanation than that personally. So we move on. And when you know, all his enemies are dead, but one of them, well, a memory of one of them is still roaming around, and he's up there on the space station with him and Miles. So they need the space station to knock out Doom's ability to control his machines from around the world. I won't say any more than that. There's not a lot of explanation around that. Zdarsky kept it kind of thin right here, which reasonably so. We didn't really need too much more exposition. They need to take out Doom's tech and his technology, and they need to take out Doom's tech, and this satellite is capable of doing it. That's all you need to know. And on this space station, what followed them there was Venom, or what on the space station, what followed them there, or was there waiting for them, was Venom. But who did he bond with? Well, I told you something stopped Kraven from dying, right? Well, guess what you get? A sweet panel. Very sweet panel. Bagley's art. Venom. Kraven. Oh my god. It looks so cool. I won't describe it because, again, if you pick up the book only for this, it would have been money well spent, because where else are you going to see a Kraven Venom? Nicknames for Kraven Venom down in the comments. Like I swear I had something for this. No, it's gone. It's gone. But I know you guys got something. What do you call a Kraven Venom? Let me know down in the comments. Well, turns out it wasn't really Venom. Turns out it wasn't really Kraven after all. Just like Spidey said, all his enemies are dead. Spidey activates the sonic device on his suit. Boom. Blows the symbiote apart. Guess what's underneath? Guess what's underneath? Skeleton. That's all that's left of Kraven. So, what do you call a skeleton Kraven Venom? Let me know down in the comments. That's about the time Parker realizes that Miles is Doc Ock, actually. How that happened, well, they don't really get too much into it, but apparently at some point, Miles must have run into a golden Octobot and lost a fight. Now, it does get stranger from there, and this is one of the things I both like and dislike about the book. Right here, like I've been talking about the things that I've liked so far, if you couldn't tell. But this is something I kind of disliked about the book. So this is one of the things I both liked and disliked about the book. This ending here, and we'll stay with me here for a second. So we get a battle between Doc Ock and Spidey on the Mindscape, which I'm not exactly sure how they end up on the Mindscape. I've got some theories. He says Doom unlocked the power of his mind, and I figure that's all the explanation we're gonna get from Zdarsky. So I inferred that either Doom taught him some magic or gave him a device that would allow him to link with people's minds, and that may be how he took over Miles' body in the first place. I digress. Zdarsky doesn't explain it any more than that, and so I won't try either. But that's the best theory that I can work with. You can post yours down below. Maybe you got something more interesting than me. I don't know. Anywho, he and Peter do battle on the Mindscape. You get a sweet fight between in quote unquote Sinister Six here. You get Venom, you get Electro, you get Rhino, you get Vulture, and you get Green Goblin. And of course, Doc Ock himself. So they go at it. Spider-Man conjures Spider-Mans from the last couple of decades, and a huge battle ensues. It's amazing. Bagley's art is very cool. See characters you haven't seen appear in the book yet, and they are drawn amazingly. Like, Bagley crushed it here. If you only pick up the book for that splash page, again, you would have spent good money. Doc Ock grows big, and of course, well, Peter conjures a version of Aunt May. She and Octavius exchange words, and Octavius relents, unable to stand against the power of love. It's really good. Like, I'm making fun of it, but I actually really enjoy this part of the book. It's excellently written and is rendered to great effect by Bagley. You get all of the emotion and all of the energy required, and Aunt May then turns and encourages Peter to do what he's always been trying to do and save everyone. So he does. We get Peter saving Miles, making Otto promise to give Miles his body back. We get the satellite coming apart because of their fight in the cracked window. The vacuum is relentless. It pushes in and tries to destroy the station. Spider-Man literally exhausts all of his webbing trying to keep the station from crumbling and coming apart before the pulse wave that will knock out Dr. Doom's technology is fired. The countdown is counting down, and with about 1:30 left, the station begins to come apart, and Pete's out of webbing. He is physically holding the station together. And that's when the Venom symbiote arrives, plugs up the hole, and displays the Spider-Man symbol in one last act of loyalty and love. With that done, and 40 seconds left on the countdown, Peter closes his eyes, conjures an image of Mary Jane, and converses with her, comforting himself in the end. I won't get into their conversation. They discuss family, they discuss friends, the kind of things you will discuss in that moment. Peter doesn't lament. He's glad of the life he's lived. He calls her his jackpot. And Spider-Man is no more. He succeeded in shutting off all of Doom's tech, and his final act was glorious and magnificent. Then you have the confrontation between Miles and Otto. Miles is back in control of his physical form. Otto is back in his old busted down body, on life support and near death. And we get some strong character from Miles here that makes me wish I could have seen more of the character in this book, but this was about Spider-Man Peter Parker, which is fine. So we get Miles, and he tells Otto about Peter's funeral, and he tells him that he won't kill Otto. Like, Miles makes it clear that he is angry at Otto, and that he thought about killing him, but he didn't, because it's not what Peter would have done. He's following his example, and he implores Otto to think about how much strength it took for him to walk away from that. And so we end the moment right there with Miles deciding to walk in a better way because of Peter's example, which is, again, good writing by Zdarsky. And also really understanding the character of Miles as well. So credit where credit is due. We get Miles and and we end the story with Miles and MJ having a conversation. MJ is very warm and kind to Miles because he's been through a lot, and because he's a good kid, she encourages him. Miles is having a hard time of it, and MJ is, of course, MJ, she always knows the right thing to say, and she suggests that maybe he needs just a little something new, a change of pace, a fresh start. So she gives him a gift, a box. What do you think is in that box? Wrong answers only. Comments down below. But I'll tell you what was in that box. It's Spider-Man's original costume. She tells him, well, you already have the name. You don't have to keep it how it is. Make it yours, more or less. And I love the dialogue here, so I won't ruin any of it. You have to take a look for yourself. It's a great way to end the book there, but then you get a little more by Zdarsky, which is just great. You get Spider-Man having a dream. You remember I mentioned that dream at the beginning? But see, this one isn't a bad dream, It's different this time. It's a good dream. And I'll leave it at that. That's Spider-Man's life story. You get some great cover art in the back if you pick up a collected edition. I've got the paperback, which is great. Like, I don't regret it at all. Just an amazing book, all in all. Some of my dislikes about the book. I would have liked to have seen more of the Civil War, but I understand that the focus was on Spider-Man, and I'm cool with that, but it would have been great to see more of that Civil War, because seeing it drawn by Bagley is, man, like, the Avengers look great, the Iron Lackeys look great. I would have loved to see more of that, but also, again, the focus was on Spider-Man here, because it was his life story. And honestly, I can't really say I have more complaints past that. Like, I know some people might complain about the chapters being a little short, and I actually enjoyed that. We didn't dwell on anything too long to get bored. But because of it, we also didn't get a lot of explanations for things, and which are unnecessary sometimes. And this time, I think the book would have been poor for it with those explanations. So again, there's a lot that I like about this book, and not a lot that I dislike. And that was it. That was what I liked and what I disliked about Spider-Man life story, and a basic rundown. If you do decide to pick up the book, I hope you decide to support your local comic store. You have any questions, comments, concerns? You think I'm wrong? If you hated the book, go ahead, comment down below. I'm going to be reading them all. We can talk about it. I like this book, and I thought the art was great. If I was going to rate it, I would give it a solid 5 out of 5. Because it's just an amazing book. You got great art. You've got consistent writing throughout. You got a short story that's concise, that you can pick up and be one and done at a good price. And you can't beat it, in my opinion anyways. If you disagree, do so down below. If you agree, do so down below in the comments. I can't wait to hear from you. I'm Parker, the comic recluse. It's been fun. Let's do it again sometime. Until then, peace.